Hey guys, hello everybody. I hope you're all doing really well. This is a video that I've wanted to make for a long time, but I feel like there's already lots of videos on it on YouTube already, so it's a little redundant, but I'm very proud of this plant and I just really wanted to share it with you guys. So this over here is my absolutely ginormous Monstera Deliciosa. It's huge. You can't really see on the other side, but it's like, it just goes all over the place. And I just wanted to kind of put my 2 cents in onto the conversation on this plant. So this here is Monstera Deliciosa. It's commonly referred to as the Swiss cheese plant. It's also commonly referred to as the split leaf philodendron, but I absolutely despise that name because it's by no means a philodendron. This is in the genus Monstera, and it's in the Araceae family, so it's an aroid. It's native anywhere from the southern reaches of mountainous tropical Mesoamerica, so southern Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, going all the way down into the Darien Gap in southern Panama. It's a beautiful beginner's plant. I think this plant is quite ubiquitous. You kind of see it everywhere. It's definitely the kind of plant that you're starting to see in grocery stores now, and seems like a lot of plant collectors have this plant, and rightfully so. There's variegated varieties that you're probably aware of. There's namely the Alba variegata, which has very sectoral white variegation to it. And then there's also the Thai constellation, which has been tissue cultured a lot in this past year. So that's kind of a really nice speckled, mottled kind of um, white variegation. And there's also the aureus variegation, which is the yellow one, the aureum. But yeah, so this guy here has thrown out new growth for me ever since I got it. Oop, it's falling over. And I'll just give you guys a couple of tips on how I keep it and things that I've found work very well for it and things that I've noticed help it accelerate its growth too. So first thing I want to say with these guys is they have to be propped up, whether it's a moss pole or it's a stake or a trellis. They definitely are climbers. They do tend to get very heavy and then they snap. If you just let them I can't talk today. Do you guys ever have days like that where you're just so tongue-tied and you just can't talk? Anyways, they don't like to be without support. Yes, you can prune them back and make them a little bushier, but they definitely appreciate a little bit of extra support. And you'll notice you'll get much bigger leaves, much better fenestrations if they are climbing vertically. So this here is a fenestration. It's basically what gives its name, the Swiss cheese plant, and these are only on the mature leaves. As the juvenile leaves come out, they're this beautiful heart shape. So this is a much younger leaf. Usually takes anywhere from about 6 months to 2 years before you start seeing these really nicely fenestrated leaves, and that's just as it gets more mature tissue. Another thing I want to say about this is they do produce lots of aerial roots. As most, if not all, aroids do. This here is just an aerial root right here. You can cut them off if you don't like the way they look. You can dip them in water, which just gives the plant a little bit more of a boost. Or you can air layer, putting them around a bag of sphagnum moss um, or coco coir, etc. They propagate incredibly easily. Can't talk today, y'all. What the hell? I keep on getting jumbled over my words. But yeah, they propagate really easily in water too. This is definitely the kind of plant that roots quickly and it's just really successful. They also ship really well. So if you ordered one of these guys online, if they're not available domestically in your area, they definitely do ship very well. They're very easy to acclimate. I highly recommend putting them in water for about 12 to 24 hours. They really don't need a whole lot, and that just perks them right back up. Now, another thing I want to say that I don't really hear a whole lot on YouTube as far as this plant goes that it really benefits from is rootboundness. So this plant over here loves being root bound. I've noticed that if you repot it, it does stunt the growth. I don't know, do you guys have that? If you guys have this plant, I find that it loves being really absolutely stuffed in. Very little room for its roots. Don't know if you guys can see there, it just goes on and on and on. And mind you, this plant is only, let's see, I think it's about 13 months old, so it's just a little bit over a year old and it's already this big, just to give you some scale of like how fast these things grow. Another thing that I recommend is watering them very frequently with diluted liquid feed fertilizer, just a little bit diluted from what the recipe says, and doing a flush watering once a month or so just to get all the salts and stuff out of your growing media. But these guys do love being fed almost every single watering and quite generously, actually. I find they push out a lot of growth. This thing here has never like not had new growth on it since I got it in like early 2021, which is like insane. It just always pushes out new growth. If you want to speed up the process and get more holes in your leaf for fenestrations, you can cut off some of the juvenile tissue. You can propagate it. Cuttings tend to get mature tissue a lot quicker than growing by seed. Another thing I really want to say is a lot of people I find don't know this, but this plant here produces a really beautiful fruit. It's a compound fruit. It emerges from a spathe. The spathiform is the type of inflorescence this plant has, and it tastes a lot like pineapple, apparently. Last time I was in Guatemala, I actually had the opportunity to set in front of me to try this fruit, and I decided not to because at the time I had no idea what it was, and I was in a different country, and I was like, I don't want to try something toxic. I don't want to have an allergic reaction in another country. But huge regret of mine. I really wish I tried it. And the interesting thing is the variegated varieties actually have variegated fruit too, which is really cool. Yeah, you can really put these outdoors in the summer if you live in a kind of warmer area. They don't tend to do very well in extreme direct sunlight. You tend to burn the leaves. I actually put this one outside last summer, and I don't know if you can see right there, there's just a little burn mark. So just another thing to be mindful of. This plant is somewhat invasive in some tropical, semi-tropical parts of the world. So anywhere from the Philippines to Colombia to even Hawaii, even Venezuela, and even some parts of sub-Saharan Africa, you'll find these plants growing in the wild just like crazy. They grow hemi-epiphytically up trees, which basically means that they anchor their roots into whatever they can find, and they grow up trees and almost parasitically sort of nestle their rooting systems into trees. So that's just another thing to be mindful of. One thing I've seen actually some people comment on online is after they water them, this plant's so big I gotta like navigate around it. They'll notice that the new leaves will have like drops of water right at the very end. It's not really picking up on camera, but I think you get the idea. And that's just guttation. So when you water this plant too much, it basically expels extra water out of the tips of the leaves. It's perfectly normal. It's just basically the plant's way of saying, hey, I'm well watered. You don't have to worry about that anymore. I've noticed that this plant is not really picky at all for as far as tap water goes. They're totally fine with the hard chemistry of any tap water as far as I've experienced. So you don't really necessarily have to water these guys with anything fancy. They're very pollutant tolerant. And another thing I want to say is, oh, actually, I don't think I've touched on this. Another thing that I think and there's really good videos on this plant online, by the way. Another good thing that I've noticed, and I've seen a lot of other people talking about it, which makes me happy because it's just really cool. So these fenestrations here, the holes in the leaves, basically have two functions. So the first function is so that the leaf is a little bit more aerodynamic. So when it gets pelted by heavy rain and heavy wind, the leaves can flex and the air currents can go right through them, and then the plant just doesn't get torn to shreds. The other survival adaptation of these fenestrations is that when the leaves get bigger as they mature, they tend to block out the younger leaves. So this is basically the plant's natural way of not expending energy on getting rid of its juvenile leaves. Instead, it keeps them on, and a little bit of the light can filter through these holes. So I just thought that was super cool. So I really want to touch on some of the problems you might experience with this plant. It is susceptible to some bacterial spot virus. I'm not sure the specific name of the virus, but it does get a bacterial spot, which kind of looks like black spots on the leaf blades, and that's most associated with water propagation. Just keep it in a little bit less humidity. With that said, though, these guys do appreciate higher humidity. They definitely don't like for the air to be too dry or stale, And they do like a little bit of an air current too, I've noticed, just not cold drafts. These guys are cold hardy to about -2 degrees Celsius. Definitely light frost. I've had these guys out into October here, but they definitely can't do a hard frost. They'll die back to a stump, and then if you catch it on time, you can regenerate them from the stump, but you gotta be really careful. I'm just trying to think of what else I'm forgetting. If you dip the aerial roots into water, they tend to grow these like really fuzzy like root hairs, and then it just helps with water absorption. If you want like a bigger plant, you can just tie them all up and put them in a side canister of water and refill it every once in a while, and it just gives your plant a little bit of an extra boost. Yeah, so that's Monstera Deliciosa. Another thing I want to say that I haven't seen too much as far as YouTube videos go. No faults to the creators, by the way. Like, there's some really, really beautiful videos on this plant on YouTube. But if you see what's called corking, which is like a little bit of like a, here, I'll put this down, a little bit of a brown woody tissue right on the base of the petiole of the leaf, that's perfectly normal. Here, I don't know if you can see it here. It's not focusing, but like right here, it gets a little bit kind of almost rust colored. That's perfectly fine. That's just the way this plant grows. And the interesting thing is you can get sport variegation on these plants. So a lot of them are tissue cultured. A lot of the plants you get in store aren't going to be grown from seed, which means that there's a high chance that mutations can occur, and every once in a while you'll get a very slight bit of sectoral variegation. I thought for a while that my plant was getting variegated here, but sometimes it grows out of it, honestly. It's not very stable variegation at all. I have mine growing in a what is this? Northwest facing window, so it doesn't get a whole lot of direct sunlight. It's somewhat bright, but it's definitely not intense. So these guys are adaptable to shade as well. I miss this guy once a day in the summer and about once every 3 days in the winter, just because some of my other aroids and stuff like it to be a little bit more humid. Definitely a benefit to plant these with other plants nearby. It just raises the humidity. And yeah, one thing I will say is if you have this plant and you notice that your plant is fruiting, which is very lucky, good on you, don't eat them when they're unripe because they have phosphoric oxalide. Or, yeah, I think it's phosphorus oxalide. Can't exactly remember the chemical name, but that is toxic, so just always eat only ripe fruit. Fruit ripens even after being cut off of the vine, so that's another thing. If you want to preserve them, the fruit will continue to ripen. And I've been talking a lot. I don't want to bore you guys. So, I hope this was informative though. Just wanted to show you just kind of the scale of this guy. Keep in mind, it's currently it's actually February the 1st when I'm filming this, 2022, so happy Chinese New Year. And I got this plant in January of 2021, which means that it's incredibly fast growing. They do benefit from artificial light too if you can't provide it that natural lighting. But just look at that, like, whoa. Even from below, it's so impressive. Yeah, this was a very long-winded video. But I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you guys learned something, and please pardon my clothing in the background. Super disorganized. But, yeah. Have fun and be safe out there, and I couldn't recommend Monstera Deliciosa again, or as much. If this gets sold to you as philodendron, or the split leaf philodendron, it's not a philodendron. Slightly different, it's in the genus Monstera. Yeah, and you know what? If you're really interested in the variegated ones, like the Thai constellation, really, honestly, my personal opinion, I would wait a couple of years, because they are getting tissue cultured. They are being mass produced, and I think the price will drop dramatically in the next couple of years. So Thai Constellation, highly recommend waiting a year or two. Just my word of caution, my word of advice. I think prices are going to go down. Yeah. Okay, talk to you later.